The square in Pyongyang pulsed with thunderous chants, the sound of thousands of voices rising and falling like waves crashing on a shore. Giant red banners stretched across the sky, each painted with the face of the great marshal smiling down as if watching every movement. Loudspeakers cracked, filling the air with commands. Bow deeply, comrades. Show your loyalty. Clap with your hearts. Jiangsu adjusted the collar of his worn gray jacket, sweat already sliding down the back of his neck despite the bitter chill. Around him, lines of families bent at the waist in perfect unison, a sea of heads lowering and rising with mechanical precision. His wife Mian bowed silently beside him, her face pale and tight with fear. Between them stood their son, Haiyan 6 years old, too young to understand why every move today was life or death. When the command came, Jiangsu bent low, forcing his eyes toward the frozen pavement. Out of the corner of his vision, he saw it. His son hesitated. Haiyan's small body lingered upright for a second too long. His bow came late, shallow, clumsy. Jiangsu's heart nearly stopped. No, please, no. He reached out with a trembling hand and pressed Haiyan's head down roughly, forcing his child into the proper posture. The roar of chants swallowed the small sound of his son's whimper. Jiangsu's face burned with terror as he whispered through clenched teeth, "Don't move. Don't even breathe." From the raised stage, rows of Korean soldiers scanned the crowd with hawk-like eyes, rifles gleaming in the pale winter light. One of them turned, gaze sharp, lingering in their direction. Jiangsu felt the weight of that stare like a knife against his spine. He tried to bow lower, praying that the soldier's suspicion would slide away. But his pulse raced with the knowledge that nothing went unnoticed in this place, not even the stumble of a child. The ceremony dragged an endless chant of loyalty, the crowd clapping until palms burned raw. Bodies forced into movements so precise they resembled puppets pulled by invisible strings. Yet Jiangsu could barely hear the voices or the marching songs. All he heard was the pounding of his own heart and the small, uneven breaths of his son beside him. When the rally finally ended, the crowds dispersed in silence, as though no one dared disturb the air after such worship. Jiangsu gripped Haiyan's tiny hand tightly, his knuckles white, his steps brisk. He didn't look left or right, only forward toward the safety of home. But behind him, he could feel it still watching, shadows still following. That night, as he sat in the dark with his family, Jiangsu could not shake the image of his son's hesitation. Simple forgotten bow, a child's innocent mistake. Yet here in North Korea, it was enough to condemn them all. The night after the rally was bitterly cold, the kind of cold that crept through the thin walls of Jiangsu's apartment and pressed against the skin like knives of ice. He sat near the small iron stove, feeding it scraps of wood he had scavenged days ago. The fire flickered weakly, unable to chase away the chill. His wife, Mian, was quiet, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Their son, Haiyan, lay asleep in the corner, his small chest rising and falling in the dim glow. But Jiangsu could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same image. His boy standing straight when he should have bowed, a pair of Korean soldiers' eyes narrowing in suspicion. A knock rattled the wooden door. 3 sharp, deliberate strikes. Jiangsu froze. No one visited at night. Not unless it was bad news. He opened the door slowly. Standing in the hallway was an old neighbor, Mrs. Han, her face half hidden in the shadows. She leaned close and whispered, "They were asking questions. The Korean soldiers. About your family. About the rally." Jiangsu felt the floor vanish beneath him. "What did they say?" Mrs. Han shook her head quickly. "I don't know, but I heard one of them mutter about a child who did not bow right. I think it was a sign of disrespect. Be careful, Jiangsu. They are watching." Her voice trembled with pity, but also with fear, as if speaking too long to him could endanger her own life. She turned and vanished down the hallway before he could answer. Inside, Mian clutched her husband's arm. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice was firm. "We must teach Haiyan. Every gesture, every word. He cannot make a mistake again. Promise me, Jiangsu." Jiangsu nodded numbly. He knelt beside his sleeping son, brushing the child's hair back from his forehead. How could he explain to a boy so young that one wrong move could mean death? That here, even innocence was dangerous. For the next few days, Their home became a place of rehearsals. Mian guided Haiyan through endless bows, claps, and chants, her voice steady even as her hands shook. Jiangsu drilled him on how to keep his eyes lowered, how to smile when ordered, how to hide every trace of weariness. The boy obeyed, confused but willing, his laughter occasionally breaking the heavy silence. But beneath their desperate lessons lingered a fear too heavy to ignore. Every creak of the floorboards outside, every knock on a neighbor's door, every heavy bootstep in the street made Jiangsu's stomach twist. He knew the Korean soldiers were watching, waiting for the smallest excuse. And though he tried to stay calm for his family, inside him grew a certainty he could not escape. A single mistake had already been made, and it could never be undone. The knock came at dawn, not the cautious tap of a neighbor, but the heavy pounding of fists against wood sharp, commanding impossible to ignore. Jiangsu's heart lurched. He had been awake already, staring at the ceiling, waiting for this very sound. Mian jolted upright, her face pale. Little Haiyan stirred in the corner, blinking sleepily, unaware of the storm that had arrived. The door opened to reveal two Korean soldiers in dark uniforms, their boots already muddy from the morning frost. Their faces were stern, unreadable, and their presence filled the small apartment with suffocating weight. "Your family," one of them said flatly, his eyes scanning the room. "You were at the rally yesterday?" Jiangsu forced a nod. "Yes, comrade. We were there." We cheered. We bowed. His voice shook despite his effort to steady it. Soldier's gaze drifted to Haiyan, who was rubbing his eyes with tiny fists. "Your child," he said coldly. "There was an incident." Boy did not bow at the right moment. Silence wrapped around them like chains. Mian pulled Haiyan close, her trembling hand shielding his face. The second soldier stepped forward, his voice low but cutting. "Do you know what it means to dishonor the marshal in public? Even a child's mistake is an insult to the dignity of our nation?" His eyes glimmered with menace. Jiangsu's knees nearly gave way. He bowed deeply, his forehead almost touching the floor. "Forgive us, comrades. He is young. He did not understand. It will never happen again. Swear it." For a moment, the Korean soldiers said nothing. The silence was worse than shouting. Finally, one of them leaned closer, so near Jiangsu could feel the cold metal of his uniform brushing against his cheek. "You are being watched," the soldier whispered. "The party does not forgive easily. Teach the child, or your entire family will pay." They left as suddenly as they had come, the sound of their boots fading into the echoing stairwell. But their warning lingered like a curse, burned into the walls of the tiny apartment. Mian sank to the floor, clutching Haiyan to her chest. Her tears spilled freely now, though she tried to hide them from the boy. Jiangsu stood frozen, fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. He could still feel the soldier's breath in his ear, the promise of destruction in his words. From that day, every shadow seemed darker, every glance from a neighbor more suspicious. Jiangsu knew that his family had been marked. The smallest slip, the tiniest rumor, could end their lives. And so began a new existence, not of living, but of surviving. Every word, every gesture, every smile became a matter of life and death. The morning after the visit, the apartment building felt different. It was the same cracked walls, the same flickering lights, the same damp corridors that smelled of boiled cabbage butt. The air was heavier. When Jiangsu stepped outside to fetch water, conversations hushed. Neighbors who once exchanged quiet greetings now kept their eyes lowered, pretending to be busy. He could feel their glances, sharp and fleeting, like daggers thrown from the corners of their eyes. He caught two women whispering near the stairwell. Their voices were low, but he knew they were about him. "They say the child forgot to bow," one murmured. "Foolish," the other hissed. "Even a child should know better. The Korean soldiers marked them. We must keep our distance." Jiangsu's throat tightened. He wanted to shout that his son was innocent, just a little boy, but he knew words were dangerous. In North Korea, even silence was safer than truth. When he returned, Mian was sitting by the window, staring blankly outside. "They've begun," she whispered without looking at him. The whispers, they'll never stop now. That evening, a knock echoed again. The violent hammering of Korean soldiers, but the soft, deliberate tap of a neighbor. An elderly woman from downstairs, Mrs. Han, slipped inside with a bowl of thin soup. Her wrinkled face was kind, but her eyes flickered with fear. "I shouldn't be here," she said quickly, placing the bowl on the table. "But I know what it is like to be watched. My son," she paused, her voice trembling. "He was taken last winter. They said he spoke carelessly. I haven't seen him since." Her words pierced through Jiangsu like glass. He bowed gratefully, though shame burned inside him. Even kindness was dangerous here. If anyone saw Mrs. Han helping them, she too could vanish. Later that night, Jiangsu stood outside on the balcony, staring at the faint outlines of the city. The propaganda loudspeakers blared patriotic songs in the distance, their hollow notes ringing through the dark. But beneath them, he could hear the whispers drifting from apartment to apartment. Some were cautious, others eager. Everyone knew. Everyone was waiting to see if his family would fall. Inside, Mian rocked high into sleep, humming softly to cover her trembling voice. Jiangsu clenched the railing, his knuckles white. The regime didn't need to arrest you immediately. Sometimes the fear itself was the punishment. They let neighbors do the work. Let whispers poison friendships. Let suspicion eat families alive. For the first time, Jiangsu wondered if surviving here was worse than dying. The morning came gray and bitter, the cold wind cutting through their thin apartment walls. Jiangsu hadn't slept. He had spent the night pacing, torn between fear and desperation. His little boy, Hyen, didn't understand the danger he had placed them in, and how could he? He was only 6 years old. But in North Korea, innocence wasn't protection. It was a liability. Jiangsu knew he had to act before the whispers grew louder, before the Korean soldiers returned. There was one path left, to beg for forgiveness. At dawn, he dressed in his patched coat and walked to the local party office. His steps were heavy, every corner of the street shadowed by portraits of the great leader, their eyes seeming to follow him. Men in gray uniforms stood watch near the gates, their faces hard, their rifles gleaming in the weak light. Inside, the air smelled of stale smoke and damp paper. Jiangsu bowed deeply before an official seated at a wooden desk. The man didn't look up, merely shuffled papers as though Jiangsu were invisible. "My son," Jiangsu began, his voice cracking. "He is young, foolish. He forgot his bow at the rally. I beg you, show mercy. Punish me instead." The official finally raised his eyes, sharp and cold. He studied Jiangsu for a long moment, then leaned back. "Your son dishonored the image of the great leader. Do you understand the gravity of this?" "Yes," Jiangsu whispered, his forehead nearly touching the floor. "I will correct him. He will never forget again." The official smirked faintly, tapping ash from his cigarette. "Correction is not so simple. The Korean soldiers have already written a report. Once something is written, it cannot be erased." The words struck like a blade. Jiangsu's heart pounded, but he forced himself lower, his body trembling. "Please," he whispered. "We are loyal. Live only to serve." The man exhaled smoke, watching it curl in the air. Then he spoke, his tone casual, almost mocking. "Loyalty is proven through sacrifice. Perhaps an offering would show your sincerity. Food, work, something valuable. Can you provide?" Jiangsu froze. Had nothing. Their cupboard was nearly empty, their clothing threadbare. But to hesitate was death. "Yes," he lied quickly. "I will find something." The official waved him away, already disinterested. "Then prove it. Do not waste my time again." As Jiangsu staggered back into the freezing streets, shame burned in his chest. He had begged, humiliated himself, and still the future hung by a thread. At home, Mian waited with questioning eyes, but he had no answer. For the first time, Jiangsu realized survival in this country wasn't just about food or warmth. It was about paying the regime endlessly with fear, with dignity, with the very soul of your family. The winter deepened, and with it, the silence in their home. Food had become a ghost, something they spoke of, but rarely touched. The small pot of cornmeal, stretched thin with water, had long since run out. Hyen's cheeks hollowed, his lips cracked from the cold. Mian tried to hide her worry, but the way her hands lingered on the empty shelves told the truth. Jiangsu remembered the official's demand, an offering to prove loyalty. But what did they have to give? Her neighbors were just as poor, and even asking for help could mark them as suspicious. Every night, Jiangsu ventured into the biting cold, wandering through alleys in search of scraps. Once he traded his last pair of gloves for half a cabbage. Another night he slipped into the edge of a frozen field, digging with bare hands at the roots of plants left behind after harvest. His fingers bled, but he carried the dirty scraps home like treasure. At the market, whispers spread of people vanishing, neighbors accused of hoarding, mothers arrested for bartering rice without permission. The Korean soldiers roamed, their boots thudding like drum beats, eyes scanning for weakness. Jiangsu kept his head low, clutching his bundle of pitiful roots, praying no one noticed. Back home, the little family sat huddled by the dim flame of a candle stub. Hyein chewed slowly on boiled weeds, too tired even to complain. Mi-in watched her husband, her voice quiet, almost broken. "You can't keep doing this. They catch you. What choice do we have?" Jiangsu cut in, his tone harsher than he intended. He softened, taking her hand. "If we don't find food, His voice faltered. He couldn't finish the thought. The next morning, the sound of marching filled the street. A knock pounded at their door sharp, commanding. Jiangsu's stomach dropped. When he opened it, 2 Korean soldiers stood grim-faced, their rifles slung over their shoulders. "You," one said. "The official demands to see you again, today." Fear coiled in his chest. He bowed deeply, nodding, forcing words past his dry throat. "Yes, comrade." As the Korean soldiers turned, Mi-in clutched his arm, whispering, "Don't go empty-handed. Find something, anything." He knew she was right. To appear with nothing would mean death. That night, Jiangsu made a decision that chilled him more than the winter wind. He would trade the last thing they had of value, his father's old watch, hidden beneath the floorboards. It was worthless in terms of food, but in a place where survival was measured by obedience, perhaps it could buy them a few more days of life. But as he clutched the watch in his fist, a thought gnawed at him, no matter how much he offered. The hunger, both theirs and the regime's, would never end. The night was colder than usual, the kind of cold that made the walls tremble and the air inside sting the lungs. Jiangsu lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to Hyeon's shallow breathing beside Mi-in. Hunger had stolen sleep from them all. He thought of the watch, the only inheritance from his late father. By morning, it would be gone, traded for survival. His heart ached, but survival left no room for sentiment. Just as he began to close his eyes, the sound came, a knock. Not the gentle knock of a neighbor, nor the hurried rap of a friend in need. It was deliberate, slow, heavy like a drum announcing doom, 3 times, and then silence. Mi-in stiffened, clutching Hyein to her chest. Jiangsu's blood ran cold. Everyone in North Korea knew. A knock at midnight was the regime's hand, reaching into homes to drag someone away. He forced himself to his feet, each step toward the door heavier than the last. When he opened it, 2 Korean soldiers stood, their faces shadowed by the weak lantern light. Their rifles gleamed. Jiangsu once said flatly, "You're wanted at the office." Now, Mi-in's voice trembled from behind him. "Please, comrades, he will report in the morning." The soldier cut her off with a sharp glare. Now, Jiangsu bowed low, hiding the trembling in his body. "Yes, comrade." He slipped the watch into his pocket, knowing this might be his only chance to offer it. The Korean soldiers didn't let him walk freely. They marched beside him through the frozen streets, their boots cracking the icy ground, while every shuttered home they passed seemed to hold its breath. He thought of Mi-in and Hyein waiting in silence, praying he'd return. At the local office, the official from before sat behind a desk stacked with papers. His expression was smug, his eyes sharp with suspicion. "Comrade Jiangsu," he began, voice slow and deliberate, "your family's loyalty is uncertain. Rumors reach me. Rumors of desperation. Desperation leads to betrayal." Jiangsu dropped to his knees, pulling the watch from his pocket. His voice cracked as he held it out. "This belonged to my father. Please, accept it as proof of our devotion. My family has nothing else. Nothing." The official took the watch, turning it in his hand, his smirk deepening. Perhaps loyalty does not die so easily. Return the Korean soldiers away. Return him home, for now. When Jiangsu stumbled back into his house, Mi-in rushed to him, tears spilling before she even spoke. He held her tightly, whispering, "We're safe tonight." But deep down, he knew the truth. Each knock would come closer, each demand heavier, until nothing remained. The fire in the clay stove had long since died, leaving only ash and the bitter cold creeping into every crack of the walls. Jiangsu sat with his back against the wall, holding his son Haiyan close. The boy's thin arms clutched his father's coat, his little head pressed against his chest. "Appa," Haiyan whispered weakly, his voice no louder than the wind outside. "Will I have rice tomorrow?" The question shattered Jiangsu's heart. He wanted to lie, to promise bowls of steaming rice and sweet bean paste, but lies tasted bitterer than hunger. He smoothed his son's hair and whispered, "Soon, my boy, very soon." Haiyan was not fooled. He had grown up in hunger, his childhood carved by empty plates and fading hope. His small eyes looked up at Jiangsu with a knowing sadness far too old for his years. Tears slipped down his cheeks, though he tried not to make a sound. Mian watched from the corner, her own tears silent. She covered her mouth so Haiyan wouldn't hear her sobbing. The silence of their grief was more deafening than any scream. Later that night, when Haiyan finally drifted into restless sleep, Jiangsu stepped outside into the frozen yard. He clenched his fists, breathing into the night air as if exhaling his rage could melt the snow. "What kind of father am I?" he thought. "I cannot feed my child. I cannot protect him from fear. I cannot promise him tomorrow." He remembered the night's earlier tear of the knock, the Korean soldiers, the official's smirk as he took the watch. Each humiliation carved another wound into his spirit. What would they take next? His home, his wife? His son, when he returned inside, Mian sat awake, eyes red but fierce. "We cannot live like this, Jiangsu," she whispered. "Haiyan will not survive another winter. Either we escape, or we bury him." Her words hit harder than any soldier's fist. Escape. The word itself was poison, yet also salvation. Jiangsu stared at his sleeping son, who whimpered in his dreams, clutching at air as if reaching for food. His tiny face glistened with dried tears. That night, Jiangsu made his choice. He would risk everything, even his life, to give Haiyan a future beyond hunger and fear. As dawn began to creep into the gray sky, he whispered to his wife, "If they kill me, you must still try. Promise me, Mian. Promise me you will carry Haiyan across, even if I fall." Mian's lips trembled, but she nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Their tears mingled, silent yet burning with the fire of parents who had nothing left but love and desperation. And beside them, in sleep, Haiyan's small hand reached out as if sensing their vow. The village slept under the heavy blanket of night, silence broken only by the distant bark of dogs and the faint crunch of boots on frozen earth as Korean soldiers patrolled. In one small, dimly lit room, Jiangsu and Mian whispered to each other, their voices trembling as if even the walls might betray them. Jiangsu leaned close to his wife. "We can't wait any longer. Every day we delay, Haiyan grows weaker. The tunnel I started months ago, it may be our only chance." Mian's eyes widened. She had known about the secret digging, the dirt under his nails, the exhaustion in his eyes, but she had never imagined he would dare finish it if they find out. She began. "They will kill me," Jiangsu interrupted, his voice steady, though his hands shook. "But if we stay, they'll kill us all slowly, through hunger, through fear." For weeks, Jiangsu had been stealing moments at night to dig beneath the small shed behind their house. Using broken tools, even his bare hands, he carved a narrow passage toward what he hoped was the borderland. A place where rumors whispered of rivers that led to China, to food, to life. The tunnel was unfinished, rough, and dangerous, but it was hope, and that was enough. That night, after Haiyan finally drifted into thin, shallow sleep, Jiangsu slipped outside to continue his secret labor. The frozen ground cut into his palms, but he worked silently, breath misting in the air. Every scrape of stone sounded like thunder in his ears. He feared a neighbor might hear, or worse, a Korean soldier passing by. Mian stayed near the doorway, her eyes darting nervously into the shadows. She prayed silently with every heartbeat. She knew one careless sound, one curious neighbor, could mean the end not just for Jiangsu, but for their son. As dawn approached, Jiangsu emerged from the darkness, his face pale and streaked with dirt. He collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. "It's not enough," he whispered. "I need more nights. Just a little more time." Mijang grasped his hand, tears filling her eyes. "Hey, we don't have time." "Haiyan doesn't have time." Jiangsu lowered his gaze. He knew she was right. Their boy's cheeks had grown hollower, his legs thinner than branches. The child's laughter, once bright, had vanished into silence. For the first time in years, Jiangsu allowed himself to dream aloud. "When we reach the other side, I'll find work. I'll buy rice. I'll buy sugar for Haiyan. He'll taste sweetness again." Mian closed her eyes, holding on to the image as tightly as he did. They both knew dreams were dangerous here, but in the shadows, with only each other, they allowed themselves to hope. And yet, in the distance, unseen, a pair of Korean soldiers walked past their shed boots, crunching in rhythm close enough that Jiangsu froze, breath caught in his chest. For now, the tunnel was still their secret. But secrets in North Korea never stayed hidden for long. The night of their escape came colder than any before. The air was sharp, each breath cutting like glass in Jiangsu's lungs. The tunnel behind the shed yawned open in darkness, its damp earth walls trembling as if they too feared discovery. Jiangsu held Mihan's hand tightly, while Haiyan, weak and shivering, clung to his mother's coat. "This is it," Jiangsu whispered. His voice cracked under the weight of both terror and hope. They lowered themselves into the tunnel, crawling on hands and knees. The soil scraped their skin, and the air grew thin. Haiyan coughed softly, every sound echoing in Jiangsu's skull like a death bell. He urged them forward, whispering, "Just a little more. Just hold on." At last, they reached the tunnel's end. Above them lay the thin crust of frozen earth, and beyond it the borderlands, where whispers of freedom still flickered like fragile candle flames. Jiangsu pressed his ear to the ground, listening. Silence. No boots, no voices. He clawed at the soil, breaking it loose. A sliver of moonlight pierced through, and for a single heartbeat, hope felt real. He turned to Mian, tears in his eyes.
Ow.
"We're almost there." But then footsteps. Heavy, deliberate.
Ow, voices.
Voices barking orders in the distance. The unmistakable crunch of boots on snow. Korean soldiers. Jiangsu froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew. Somehow they had discovered the tunnel. Perhaps a neighbor betrayed them. Perhaps the patrols had noticed his late-night movements. In North Korea, secrets rarely stayed buried. The ground above them split open violently. The lantern's harsh light blinded their eyes. Shadows loomed over the whole uniforms, rifles, the cold stare of men trained to crush hope. "Out," a Korean soldier barked. Now Mian pulled Haiyan close, trembling. Jiangsu rose to shield them, his body trembling but defiant. His hands shook as he lifted them in surrender. "Please, he's just a child." The butt of a rifle struck his back, sending him to his knees. Haiyan cried out, the sound raw and small in the night air. Mian clutched their son, tears streaking her dirt-stained face. The Korean soldiers dragged them from the tunnel one by one. Jiangsu's dreamed the sweetness of sugar for his boy. The warmth of freedom crumbled into the frozen soil beneath him. Under the pale moon, Jiangsu dared one last glance at Mian and Haiyan. He whispered, voice breaking, "Forgive me." The Korean soldiers bound his hands, their faces expressionless. The tunnel lay open behind them, like a wound in the earth, a silent witness to a dream that never reached the light. And as the family was marched back toward the village under the soldiers' guns, Jiangsu understood the cruel truth. In this land, even dreams were forbidden.